A BMW 5 Series has always been the driver's choice in the executive sector, but today more than ever it must attach even greater priority to issues of efficiency, refinement and space. Can this sleeker F10 version marry speed with sensibility? Over 4 decades and 5 different generations, BMW's 5 Series has been the default choice in the British executive sector, a tough legacy to inherit for this F10 version launched in 2010. This one does, after all, have to follow the hugely successful E65 series, which sold over 90,000 units to British buyers between 2003 and 2010 and managed to keep BMW's market leadership in this sector in the face of a tide of excellent Audi A6 and Mercedes E-Class models that engulfed the Bavarian brand in other parts of Europe. British buyers like their BMWs. Whether they'll like this one as much is an interesting question to consider. Taking on Mercedes and recognising that most buyers are in their 50s has necessitated a more luxury-orientated approach. Once a bigger 3 Series sports saloon, this 5 is now essentially a shortened 7 Series luxury limo. But, as BMW point out, that doesn't necessarily mean that with the right spec in place, it can't still remain the default driver's choice in this class. It's simply now, they say, a car with a wider breadth of abilities, whether you're after a truly luxurious or a truly sporting driving experience. Let's find out if they're right. Now, you take a seat in any 5 Series with high expectations when it comes to the driving experience it'll offer. Previous versions have, after all, leaned heavily on the company's competition heritage and benefited hugely from all the weeks that BMW insists they must have spent pounding round the Nürburgring. Yet this is at odds with the kind of driving most owners actually do. Most 5s, after all, are bought in automatic form by older customers who spend most of their lives on the motorway. With this F10 generation model, it was time the engineers decided to get a bit more real. Which is why, in standard form at least, you may not feel this car to enjoy the significant sporting advantage over its rivals that its predecessor had. Mind you, it's significantly more luxurious and user-friendly. Let's just take one example, the adoption of the electric power steering setup in place of the old hydraulic system. No, it's not quite as feelsome, but in the cold light of an accountant's balance sheet, the efficiency savings it offers are much more important, as is the fact that for the first time it offers owners a self-parking option that will guide this car into the tightest space with the minimum of driver input. The automatic gearbox too is another instance of BMW's increased emphasis on the real needs of its actual customers, offering no fewer than 8 speeds and available not only on top models but as an option right across the range. On the move, in standard form, this feels like the shortened 7 Series that it actually is. The ride remote, the handling polished but unmemorable. It's also super refined, due not thanks to copious soundproofing but to careful engineering at source. More enthusiastic 5 Series diehards for whom all this may not be enough shouldn't despair though, nor do they really need the 4-wheel drive system that BMW has developed for this car. A careful trawl through the options list can create a car that's every bit the equal or superior of any 5 that the Bavarian brand has yet produced. Now, if that's what you'd like, then there are really 3 things that you really need to focus on. The first is the DDC dynamic drive control system that offers a choice of 4 suspension settings, comfort, normal, sport and sport plus, that depending on your choice really alter the character and feel of this car. The second must-have for press-on drivers is the active steering system that below 37 miles an hour turns the rear wheels very slightly in the opposite direction to the fronts, tightening the turning circle and improving low-speed response. Above 37 miles an hour, the rear wheels turn very slightly in the same direction as those at the front. If you combine this with the dynamic drive system that reduces body lean in corners by twisting the anti-roll bars, you get a car that really comes alive. lane changing fluid and accurate, cornering akin to a shark turning towards a meal. Brilliant, just as a BMW should be. Power for most customers will come from the 242 brake horsepower 6-cylinder 530D diesel model that I'm driving here, and you can see why. Its 6.3 second 0 to 60 time is virtually as quick as the far thirstier petrol 535i, and with 540 newton meters of torque in this diesel playing just 400 newton meters in the 535i, there's no real comparison between the two cars when it comes to real pulling power. Now, other diesel options include the 181 brake horsepower 4-cylinder 520D diesel, that's a 2-litre unit, or the 201 brake horsepower 6-cylinder 525D. Both will be more popular than the 201 brake horsepower 523i or 254 brake horsepower 528i petrol options, or indeed the minority interest 401 brake horsepower V8 550i. That's the final stepping stone before M5 ownership. The shape of this 5 Series, with its short overhangs, heavily contoured bonnet and strong side creases, has caused a lot less controversy than that of its angular predecessor, which may or may not be a good thing from BMW's point of view. Apparently, it's styled to match the weight distribution, the bonnet, the wings and the doors being fashioned from aluminium to help maintain the 50-50 weight distribution over the axles that the Bavarians feel is so important. One thing's for certain, thanks to an 80mm increase in its wheelbase, this 5 is bigger than any before it, which is hardly surprising when you consider that it sits on a platform originally developed for much larger cars, namely the large 7 Series luxury saloon or the huge 5-door 5 Series Gran Turismo. It's certainly slightly bigger than its immediate Mercedes E-Class and Audi A6 rivals, which makes it slightly curious then that its 520-litre boot is a little smaller. There's no issue for longer items with this car thanks to the helpful provision of a ski hatch here. But otherwise, if you want more space, you have to pay extra for folding rear seats on the saloon model, or opt for the Touring Estate, which gives you 560 litres with all the seats in place. That's enough for a washing machine, or 1,670 litres with the rear seats folded flat. Take a seat in the rear though, and you'll find where the designer's priorities lay. There's significantly more leg and shoulder room than before, and were it not for this central transmission tunnel, there'd be comfortable room back here for 3 adults. At the wheel, there's a high dashboard angled slightly towards the driver and dominated by a huge information screen, which serves the iDrive control system, and its functions for the control of sat-nav, stereo, phone, trip computer, suspension settings, and much, much more. Sure, it's complex, but then so are the fiddly touchscreen setups of some rivals. You'll adjust very quickly. List pricing suggests that you're likely to be paying from just under 30 to just over £50,000 in rough terms for your new BMW 5 Series. Now, you need to allow a premium of around £2,200 if you want the Touring Estate version, and if you're an enthusiastic driver, you'll need at least £3,500 extra to add the dynamic drive and active steering systems that really make this BMW handle like it should. As for its arch enemies, Mercedes E-Class and Audi's A6, well, it's difficult to make direct comparisons since engine outputs and sizes rarely match exactly. But where direct comparisons do exist, you're probably looking at paying around £700 to £1,200 less if you're going for an Audi A6, and about the same level as this BMW if you're opting for a Mercedes E-Class. The Mercedes might even cost you a little more. Jaguar's XF is also a popular and tightly priced choice. Whether you choose a saloon version like this one or the Touring Estate body style for your 5 Series, there's a wide range of very impressive engines on offer. The mainstream lineup is topped and tailed by the entry-level 4-cylinder 181 brake horsepower 2-litre 520D diesel, while at the other end of the scale there's a V8 401 brake horsepower 4.4-litre 550i petrol model. In between, it's 6-cylinder power all the way. If you're going for a diesel, that means either the 201 brake horsepower 525D or this car, the 242 brake horsepower 530D. Petrol-wise, you have a choice between 201, 254 or 302 brake horsepower, depending on whether you go for the 523i, 528i or 535i models. Standard equipment has been improved on this model to include Dakota leather as standard, as well as the high-quality stereo, climate and cruise control systems that you'd expect. A nice option on this car is the camera system that from a variety of angles shows you exactly where you are and helps you manoeuvre more easily. Safety provision runs to at least 6 airbags, as well as the system that primes the electronic braking and stability setups if a crash looks inevitable. Thanks to the clever Efficient Dynamics program, here's where every modern BMW really comes into its own. The fact that the 530D variant that most customers choose can almost hit the 160 grams per kilometre CO2 mark will probably swing more 5 Series sales than any other single attribute. It's the same with the entry-level 520D. It's 132 grams per kilometre CO2 return, akin to the kind of figure you'd expect from some family hatchbacks. Fuel economy is equally standout. You get 44.8 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle from the 530D and 56.5 miles to the gallon from the 520D. No Mercedes, Audi or Jaguar can get close to this kind of return. And the petrol versions too, in this 5 Series range, are impressively efficient. The 523i manages 37.2 on the combined cycle and 177 grams per kilometre of CO2. But you don't lose out greatly by opting for another 100 brake horsepower in the shape of the 535i, which manages 33.2 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 199 grams per kilometre of CO2. Insurance groupings range between 34 and 45 on the 1 to 50 scale. Be in no doubt, this is a hugely accomplished car, but it's one that requires familiarity and plenty of miles before its true qualities really begin to shine through. Refinement, cabin space and running costs are all class leading. The real question though is whether in achieving these goals, BMW's status as purveyor of the ultimate driving machine has been compromised. Ultimately, I've decided it hasn't been. True, you've to specify your car properly and expensively for BMW's dynamic brilliance to shine through, but the end result for most will be well worthwhile. The finest handling executive car you can buy, just as a 5 Series should be.